will pull up the slides.
Hello out there. Welcome to another Pragmatic Institute Ask Me Anything session with a Pragmatic Institute instructor. It is so good to see you all again. Hello out there in YouTube land. If we can't see you and you can see us, welcome back once again. Hello to anyone joining us in the Zoom room as well. You're of course all welcome to join by that format if you'd like. It's a much easier way to get your questions in because you can just interrupt me and stop me from talking, which is a hard thing to do. Just ask my wife. All right, I'm Eddie Gordon, courseware designer at Pragmatic Institute. And a quick note at the top, of course, we got to plug the Pragmatic alumni community because we're so proud of it. This is the new online community format where you will be able to mingle with peers in the industry. Our instructors show up there. You've got access to them in there, all sorts of tools and just career-changing resources available for you there. And of course, we are so proud to offer it now as a complimentary lifetime benefit for anyone who has taken a public or online product class from Pragmatic Institute. So don't miss out on that opportunity. It will change your life. I am very happy to introduce today. It's his first time here in the Ask Me Anything session. Our Pragmatic Institute instructor, Clark Smith. Clark, so glad to have you. Glad that we finally got you.
It's great to be here.
I promised I'm gonna take it easy on you a little bit. I won't throw those gut-wrenching gotcha moment questions right from the top, but we'll warm you up a little bit and toss the hard balls later on. Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I think
the first one I've got here. Oh, and of course, anybody who's in the Zoom, if you'd like to ask a clarifying question, just jump in and do that. If you'd like to post a question to me in the chat, you can do that as well. And I'll toss them over to Clark as we get them. But the first one I've got here is from Tawny. Tawny asks, we are a startup that has seen success over the last 2 years, but COVID-19. I started off with the COVID question. Usually it comes at the end, but we did it up top this time. COVID-19 has certainly affected our market. We are looking to craft a launch strategy for some new features we want to roll out in the coming months. Any advice on the best way to go about this? And would you shift your approach considering the pandemic or press on like normal? What do you think, Clark?
You know, the one thing I would do is not press on like normal. COVID has changed just about everything for a lot of people. So now I don't know specifically what kind of solution Tawny and her company sell, but it's just had a dramatic effect on the way people launch new products and new features, both in the B2C and in the B2C world. You know, if you think back, way back to 2019, you know, a lot of times companies built their launch plans around events. In the B2B technology world, they built it around things like Salesforce, Dreamforce. Why wouldn't you? You get, you know, I don't even know how many, 80,000, 90,000 people together in San Francisco. And they're all looking for B2B CRM solutions. It's a great place to launch a new B2B technology product. Same thing happens in the B2C world. You know, you've got the annual Consumer Electronics Show, and that was really where product launches happened for a lot of people. Other times, you know, maybe people were building their launches around their own sales meeting or whatever kind of a customer event they have. Those things are gone. And so, you know, if in the past you were using any kind of an event to launch your products, you would absolutely have to rethink your launch plan, because even though there are some online things that are happening to try to replace those events, the feedback I get from folks in my courses every single week is that they don't do the same thing. They are not nearly as effective. You don't have those people milling around talking. People might jump on to hear a session in an online event and then they bail out and go do something else. So, if you're using events as part of your launch plan in the past, you absolutely have to rethink it. But it even goes beyond that, because think about what's happened as people's work lives have shifted from the office to home. Again, every single course I teach, I hear from people that their day is just consumed with email and Zoom and Slack. People tell me they're spending more time working. And so because of that, even if you do things like webinars, it is hard for people to carve out an hour to do a webinar, because they end up with Slack meetings and other things that interrupt that time. So before, where they could have easily carved out a half an hour or an hour in the middle of their day, now that everything at work has to happen via Zoom or Teams or whatever, people have a hard time carving out that chunk of time to jump on a webinar or to learn about the new things that you're doing, Tawny. And so I think what I'd recommend is think about how you can tailor your launch to that situation. How can you do things differently to make sure that for people whose days are consumed with Slack and email and Zoom, you can make it easy for them to learn about the new things that you're doing? That might mean something like you need to create a quick little 5-minute video that introduces what you're working on and give them a chance to, go someplace to learn more about it. Same thing is even true with email marketing. One of the things I hear from people is their email boxes are absolutely overflowing. And so it is much harder, I think, for people to break through. And so I think you really need to think about who are those buyer personas that you're targeting. Or in case of new features, maybe it's users and you just want to introduce that new functionality to them. But figure out where are the places that you could work your way into their schedule to introduce the things that you're working on, the things that you're getting ready to launch. Someday things may go back to normal, but I would tell you that I think for most of this upcoming year, COVID is still going to have a huge impact on people's work lives, on their personal lives. Again, think about a mom working from home right now, trying to carve out an hour to jump on a webinar when she's trying to juggle online work for herself with school for her kids. So I think you've really got to tailor your launch strategy to some of those challenges, because it is a very different world right now. And so, were you going to say something, Eddie?
Yeah, I was wondering, what do you think it was about the big in-person events that made them successful launch platforms? Was it just getting so many people there in person? I mean, if you think about it, if you only ever sold your product to the people that were there at the event, that wouldn't be that many sales. Why were they considered such necessary core components of a launch? And can we distill that into a non-in-person world in the COVID times?
Really good question. I mean, I think the reason they were such an important part of people's launch planning is because oftentimes people were in that mindset. So when I go to Dreamforce, I'm thinking about CRM. I'm thinking about those tools. And so you get people whose mindset is focused on those kinds of tools and those kind of needs for 3 or 4 days. They're talking about it. They're talking to other people. And so I think that's why that was an effective way to launch things. And again, there's a ton of other, similar events, but people would carve out that time. They'd go spend 2 or 3 days thinking about that part of their business, that part of how they do things. And so I think that's why it worked. I honestly don't know if there's a great analog. I've talked to so many people who are trying different things, but I think what I hear from folks in class week after week is, rather than the big things, the things that have been effective in replacing them are small things that they're doing that are available to people on an ongoing basis. They're doing things like this, where you can jump on for an hour, where they're doing office hours, so that once a week for an hour, if somebody's got a question, they can jump on and ask their question. And so I have not heard, candidly, I've asked people, I started asking them about 4 or 5 months ago in all my classes, what are you doing differently today? And I have not heard anybody come back and say, yeah, we found a great replacement. Now, I have heard people that are doing things like interactive versions of their demos or, other kinds of tools. Even somebody told me that they had built an interactive trade show booth and had set it up so that people could go there anytime they wanted to. And it's got all different kinds of things. There's a product demo there. There's sell sheets. I mean, it's just a way to take that mindset and try to, move it online. But I think for at least the remainder of 2021, maybe until we get to fourth quarter, you're going to have to continue to rethink how you launch things. We may get back to that point in the future, but one of the things that we always tell people in the focus class and in our launch class is make sure that you don't just use a checklist. When you do a product launch, when you launch new features, take the time to look at how you've done things in the past and think about what's changed in our market, what's changed with our personas, because you don't want to, even in good times, just assume that what worked for you in the past is going to work this time.
Yeah. I guess if there's any silver lining to the COVID cloud, it's that at least here at the beginning, we're all in the same boat.
Yep.
It's not like just our company is forbidden from doing big in-person events. It's across the board, but importantly, I think it's not going to stay even like that because people are working every day to find new innovations, ways to get ahead. So while we may have all started that way, if you're not on the ball, people are going to find ways to jump ahead.
Well, and I think you're right. You're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that's changed is, and from the folks that I talked to, when COVID hit in March, first, everybody delayed stuff for 90 days. They thought this will be gone in 90 days. We're just not going to do anything for 90 days, but try to survive. When they realized it wasn't going away, they shifted to, okay, we've got to figure out a way to get through things. But the folks at the places where I used to work that I stay in touch with told me that, they started doing sales calls again, but deals weren't closing during that second wave of 90 days. They said finally 6 months into this, so in September and October, deals started closing again. But people who are buying technology solutions have had to rethink how they buy them. I mean, so that you almost see the evolution happening because a lot of folks weren't comfortable buying a solution from a company where they've never met somebody in person, where they've never been able to actually sit down with a salesperson, where they've never been able to go visit the office and make sure that this company is real. So it is continuing to evolve, but I mean, really, we're now only kind of 4 months past that second hurdle. And so people are still trying to figure this stuff out. They're still trying to figure out, how do I buy something when you're talking about an enterprise SaaS platform? How do I buy that online from a bunch of people that I've never met in person, from a company that I don't even know how real they are? And so it is changing those things. And so it's not just how you launch things, trying to understand how is the way people shop for our solution different, because it is changing. And people who are buying big enterprise solutions online, I just talked to a friend of mine who's a salesperson at the company where I worked for 10 years, and they've closed a bunch of deals, but they didn't close until December when people had to spend the money, at the end of the year.
Right.
But that's really when deals started closing. And he said they went through the first, whatever it was, 8 months of the pandemic, and very few deals closed. And they just started closing in December when people had to spend the money or they were going to lose it.
Yeah.
So people are still feeling this out. And so, it has had such a profound impact that, I think a lot of people, both in terms of how they sell things and in terms of how people buy things, there's going to be a lot more evolution over the next 6 months.
Well, that was our first question, Clark. We've done one.
All right.
How about that? Tani got her money's worth on that one, didn't she? Shout out. We've had a couple new members join us in the Zoom. Gary and Eric, welcome, guys. Feel free to jump in, unmute, and just interrupt me or post over in the chat if you need clarification to anything we're talking about or have your own question. Just do it. It's fun. And I'm going to move over here, Clark, to another question we have submitted from Kyle. Kyle says, What is a proto persona? This is my first time hearing it. In what cases is it best to use, and what is its degree of importance? Maybe, Clark, if you could specify, maybe start with just a persona, just a quick summary of what that is, and then how a proto persona is different.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you've taken pragmatic courses, particularly courses like Build, you probably know that we talk a lot about personas. And from a pragmatic perspective, we want your personas to be what we call an archetype. And an archetype is a fact-based biography of someone who represents a significant population, either of your users or of your buyers. And so, again, we tell people we don't want these to be stereotypes. We want them to be based on what you know about your users and your buyers. A proto persona, it's a very, very different approach. It's really more of an approach that comes kind of from the world of UX, but a proto persona is really a prototype persona. It's essentially what we think our personas are. It's not based on facts. A lot of times people develop proto personas in a situation where they don't have a ton of details. Maybe it's a brand new product and they don't yet know who those buyers or users are going to be. Other times it's because they are moving quickly. And so this is a really rough early version of who you think a persona is. You know, think of it as a rough draft or a very rough sketch of your personas. And it's something that people often use kind of early in the development process, who they think their users or buyers are going to be. But if you've got an established product, if you already know who your users are and who your buyers are, then I'd recommend that you actually jump over that proto persona process and actually build personas based on the information you have about your actual users, about the people that buy your products. So again, proto persona literally is a prototype persona. It's a rough sketch of a persona, something that people often use early on. But if you've got users, if you've got buyers, use what you know about them to create your personas.
I imagine there are probably companies out there who think they have full-blown personas, but in fact are actually using proto personas all this time. What's the danger in doing that, Clark?
Yeah, the real danger is if you aren't sure, you know, just like we tell people, you don't ever want to build something for an anonymous user. You want to know who those users are so that your dev team understands who they're building for. And proto personas present that same risk. Now, they're an educated guess about who your personas are, but often they include a lot of assumptions. I can give you a really specific example from my experience. The company that I came from, the marketing technology company where I was chief strategy officer, one of the challenges we had was really helping our developers understand who our users were. And our platform is used by brands that sold through dealers, distributors, and franchisees to manage their local marketing. And often there was this assumption that the people who used our platform were relatively sophisticated from a technology standpoint. These are folks who, a lot of them, you know, the assumption was it's an insurance agent. It's somebody who works in an office. They sit in front of their computer all day long. And so with a proto persona approach, we probably would have created proto personas with the assumption that they were, you know, fairly technically savvy. The reality was our users were people in many cases who, you know, spent their day on the phone selling insurance. They weren't technically sophisticated. We even had some personas for folks, for some of our clients who spent their days installing satellite dishes on people's homes, who, sure, that's a fairly technically advanced process for somebody to go through, but they didn't know anything about computers or about marketing. And so we had to really capture the fact that these are not people who understand how to create marketing materials, who have much of an idea about marketing, in some cases who don't know anything beyond, you know, using Microsoft Word and email. And capturing that for our developers was really important, to make sure that you understood that you're building something for somebody who might be super effective at selling insurance, who might be really effective at running a retail store or running a fast food restaurant, but they weren't technically sophisticated when it came to creating marketing materials.
Yeah. A phrase I've heard the instructors say in the past is, when you're creating personas, you shouldn't be doing creative writing. This isn't the time to publish your great American novel you've been wanting to do all this time. These got to be real folks.
Absolutely.
I see Alika's jumped in and joined us. It's good to see you again. Welcome back. Don't be shy. Clark, I'm going to toss you this one from Ralph next. Ralph says, we are thinking about beginning a subscription model. What are the steps I should take to figure out if this is a good idea for our product or to just price it individually?
Yeah.
Subscription models, they're all the rage right now, right?
They are. So I wish Ralph was here because there's a bunch of questions I'd like to ask him. The biggest one being, do they pay for your product already? Because one of the biggest challenge for technology companies is going from a product that's free to getting people to pay for a subscription for that thing that used to be free. Really, this is one of those places where experiments are one of the most effective ways to try to understand how should I price this? Is a subscription model something that will work for us? At the end of the day, if you're going from a free offering to a subscription offering, you've got to figure out what additional value you're going to provide to people that's going to make it worthwhile for them to pay you. Now, that can be something as simple as expanded access to customer service. That could be additional functionality or additional content. But figuring out what is it that we can offer that will make people feel like they're getting some value for going from free to something that they then pay for on an ongoing basis, even if they make an initial purchase. So they buy this thing, but then today they get support for free. And now you're saying, look, how do we find a way to get people to continue to pay us monthly for support? It really all boils down to what value are we going to give them that's worth them paying us $3 a month, $5 a month, $9 a month for that ongoing support. And so that's why experiments can be really, really helpful. We actually talk about a company that did a really interesting job doing this exact thing in foundations, but there's a company out there called Buffer, and Buffer is a social media management platform. And they were struggling with this exact same question. You can actually look up the Buffer case study. It's on Medium. But what's interesting was they pretty much just outlined for people, and they made it look professional and official. It's an easy thing to do today by setting up a website that looks like it's for a finished solution. They gave people the information on what are you going to get if you sign up for Buffer. They allowed them to actually select a pricing plan that was attractive to them. And then what they did was they interviewed all those people to try to understand, okay, why did you choose that pricing plan? Why did you want to pay monthly instead of quarterly? And how much did the different things in this offering influence your willingness to pay? And then what was it that got you to the point where you were willing to pay for that now? So Buffer is a really interesting example, but those kinds of experiments are often the best way at that point to try to understand how can we shift to a subscription model? What are the things that people would be willing to pay for? Because you can put together different packages of, content or service or other kinds of benefits. You can ask people to, tell you what they would pay for that. And so really, I think about how can we put this idea in front of our current customers? How can we give them a chance to choose, the pricing plan that they prefer? I even know companies that have gone as far as creating a sort of a stealth version of the product, putting it in the market to see who signs up for it and which pricing plans they chose. And then they rolled that stealth version of the product into their own offering once they had established from a subscription perspective what were people willing to pay for.
No kidding. That's kind of sneaky.
So, Clark, have a clarifying question for you on willingness to pay, because we're getting ready to do some interviews, and admittedly, you know, we are doing it in beta, and we know next time going forward, we shouldn't have done that. But, you know, this is a junior product team that are, you know, healthcare clinicians moving into the product space. So you know, we took beta candidates who, for whatever reason, didn't make the final cut list for doing actual beta because, you know, they already raised their hand. And we're going to have some value conversations with them. We already have a bank of questions. We're going to do some role playing, you know, before we actually speak with the customer. So once we establish, you know, I know what our questions are. Once we establish that the client perceives value, like, is it okay to put like a dollar range out in front of them? You know, because at some point you're trying to get a range or, you know, some kind of ballpark from them. But again, that's to me after you've established that they perceive value and a few reasons why.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to do it. The challenge you've got is if you go to people and you say, what would you pay for this? You know, who knows? You know, sometimes they're going to tell you, oh, it should be free. But if you can put a dollar of value in front of them and say, would you pay this? You know, it's going to start to then get you some sense of, are they willing to pay that much?
Yeah.
It's great too. It's a good way to do it. You know, if you can do some kind of an even, you know, virtual or a mock-up of an online sign-up process so that they can just go, yeah, I'd pay $4.99 a month for that, or $9.99 a month, or $69.99 a month for that. But I think you want to, because again, the challenge you have when you go to ask somebody, how much would you pay for this? That's a lot for somebody to process. It's like, okay, am I supposed to say $4.99, or is that worth $49.99, or is that worth $199.99? Because they don't have a real basis for comparison there. But if you put a number in front of them and say, hey, would you pay, you know, $9.99 a month for that? And you can outline what the value is, and they go, yeah, that seems reasonable.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I mean, or, okay, let me ask you a question. What are additional thoughts how to get ballpark ranges from clients? I mean, open to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, you know, it is really hard to ask people what they would pay for something that they, you know, haven't used. Again, the best thing you can do, if you can show them something, a prototype.
Oh, I see. Okay, so you're saying we've got to kind of have some prototype, or even like a PowerPoint, that kind of sketches or outlines or whatever. Okay.
Even if it's a clickable PowerPoint mock-up, even as a starting point, to be able to show them something. It's just really, really hard for people. Now, the other thing that you can do, depending, if you operate in a category where there are established competitors, and there are people in the marketplace who understand the different competitive offerings out there, you can use them as at least a starting point. You know, if you've got either analysts or consultants or, you know, just trusted customers that you could put something in front of, and you could ask them to, you know, you could describe what this new solution is going to be. You could show them some mock-ups and ask them, you know, what would you expect to pay for this? Mm-hmm. You know, that can be helpful as a way to get at least a starting point.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Alika. Good to see you again. Let's see here, Clark. I've got a question from Bevy, who asks, I am looking for ways we can better educate and provide resources to sales to help with sales enablement. We are a B2B SaaS company and are still figuring out what other materials we can provide that go beyond the normal product descriptions, features, infographics, and personas. How can Bevy better help her sales department, Clark?
Yeah, really good question. So there's a couple of things I would tell you, and I'm going to make some assumptions here. But first thing I would tell you about salespeople is that, in my experience at least, the best way to educate salespeople is to show them. So hopefully you have got a demo, you've got mock-ups, you know, prototypes that you can show them how something works and help them to really understand. Sometimes it's really tough for salespeople to understand things like, what does this really mean? And so the place I would always start with your sales team in terms of educating them is show them what the solution actually does so that they can think about how to describe that in their own words. The other thing that I think is really important to articulate to salespeople beyond features and beyond even personas is to capture what are the problems that your product solves for different types of buyers. Because again, you often, salespeople are just going to get into this habit of talking about features. And the challenge with talking about features is often you're then just competing feature for feature against other solutions. But if your sales team can clearly articulate the problem that your solution solves, it allows them to have a much more compelling conversation with prospective customers. It allows them to go talk to somebody and say, we hear from a lot of our clients that, I'm making this up, but creating different versions of web banners is a real headache for them. How does your team manage that today? So it allows them to have a much more intelligent conversation with the people that they're talking to. And then the third thing I would do is I would capture some stories about how your current clients are using your solutions that you can share with your sales team. They don't have to tell people who the customer is, who the client is, but if you give them stories so that they can go in and talk to a prospective customer and say, one of our telecom clients has saved $100,000 in advertising agency fees by using our platform to automate the creation of web banners. That's a really compelling thing for them to be able to tell people. And so those kinds of stories about, and I'd make them specific. I wouldn't make it a long story, but if they have stories that they could tell people, and sometimes, again, salespeople often are involved in the front end of that process. Sometimes they don't have that ongoing exposure to your customers to understand the benefit that your customers get out of your platform. And so capture those stories for them so that they can go out there and talk to somebody and explain how other people are getting value out of the solutions that you've created. So those are really the things that I would do for salespeople because, again, no matter how much you document, features and create product descriptions, it's better for them to see it. It's better for them to then be able to tell a story about how someone else is using it. And it's better for them to be able to clearly articulate what's the problem we solve for our customers.
And of course, when we say stories, we mean true stories. Don't go making stuff up, right?
Yes, we do mean true stories. That is
credibility
correct.
Is important here.
Yes, absolutely.
They may want to check up on you.
Yeah, but the reason I say stories is, again, it doesn't have to be a case study. Certainly you probably don't want them saying, our customer X is using our system to save money this way. But if they can explain that, yeah, one of our telecom clients does this. Again, so the more specific you can make it, the better it's going to be. And obviously, you want it to be true, even if you have to change the numbers a little bit so you're not exposing real client information.
Yep. Good. Well, Clark, I've got 3 questions here that all revolve around the topic of go-to-market strategies, and I want to get all of them, but I think I might just group them all 3. I'll read all 3 of them to you here, and then just turn you loose. Are you ready?
Yep, I'm ready.
We've got one from Michelle. Michelle says, what are some easy ways that I can gather information to create a go-to-market strategy? My boss wanted this information yesterday. Uh-oh, Michelle's in trouble. And we simply don't have the resources or time it takes to develop it out at the moment. Any suggestions are appreciated. That's Michelle. Then we have Jill, who says, what are some ways I can research the competitive landscape a bit more and help my product teams best maintain the ultimate product market fit? And then third from Elizabeth, what are some easy and repeatable ways that I can speed up my time to market when launching a new product? So all around that go-to-market process, speeding it up. What do you think, Clark?
Yeah. So again, not knowing what specific industry they're in makes this a little trickier. I mean, there's a couple of ways that you can do this. I mean, obviously for a go-to-market strategy, the first thing you've got to understand is what's the competitive landscape look like. Now, if you happen to operate in a category that's covered by Forrester or Gartner or some other third-party, analyst group, usually they do a pretty good job of capturing that. And so I would start there. See if somebody else has already done some of that work for you. I know their stuff is expensive if you buy it directly from them. One of the things that I have done in the past is if there is a Forrester or Gartner or other third-party research study out there that covers your category and you simply can't afford to spend $3,000 or $4,000, buying that, find the name of it and Google it. One of the things that happens is there are companies out there sometimes that pay Gartner and Forrester for the rights to share their category research, the Gartner quadrant reports. Usually it's those companies that score really well. And so sometimes you can go to their website, you can give them your contact information. They might be a competitor, but they usually then will let you at least download a lot of the key information, sometimes the entire report. So if you have a really limited budget, that's a good starting point. It at least helps you understand what's the competitive landscape look like. If you're in a category that's not covered by Gartner and Forrester, I'll tell you, this is where really Google and LinkedIn are your best friends. What we did in order to kind of build out our competitive landscape, we were not in a category that was covered by them extensively. Literally go on LinkedIn. Find the companies that you compete against. Grab their LinkedIn kind of company description as a starting point. That's going to help you understand how other people in your category are positioning themselves. And then I would actually quickly capture as much information as you can from their company LinkedIn profile. How many employees do they have? Break them even down by roles. That's going to give you a pretty quick way of at least figuring out who are these people that we're competing against. In terms of that information, you can also use it to estimate their revenue. I mean, look at your company. What's your revenue per employee? If you've got 100, employees and your revenue is $1 million, then divide that out and use that same revenue per employee to at least estimate the market share and revenue of the people that you compete against. That gives you a pretty good starting point to understand the competitive landscape. Then when you're thinking about your go-to-market strategy, I mean, the one thing you do have to understand there is, who are the different buyer personas that you're going to be talking to? I'm not sure there's any way to shortcut that process, but the one thing that you can do is try to identify, what segment of the market is the segment that gives us the opportunity to succeed the most kind of quickly and efficiently. What I mean by that is, if you've got different segments, maybe you've got kind of a mid-sized segment and then a large kind of enterprise segment. Understand the differences there and figure out, is there one segment that we can focus on that's going to allow us to quickly get some traction here, to quickly get some wins under our belt? So focus on that segment, part of your go-to-market strategy that's going to allow you to quickly score some wins. Sometimes that means that we focus on a segment that has the most basic needs of all the segments we target, because then we can quickly build a solution for that segment. They don't need the full featured solution that's got, all the back-end integrations and all the other things. We can focus on, the self-managed solution that's a standalone solution. So again, you've got to understand the different segments that you're targeting. I don't know that there's any way around that. But again, one of the more successful launches that we did at the company that I came from, we were launching a large enterprise platform that was used for managing channel fund and co-op partner programs. It's a really complicated solution. And the core audience that we were going after were Fortune 1000 companies that sell through thousands of dealers and resellers and distributors. They also have a really long sales cycle. It tends to be an 18-month sales cycle because most of them have a solution in place. Most of them have a contract for that solution already. So we looked at the market. We knew the lower end of that market, companies that had 200 to 500 dealers and distributors, had a much more streamlined need. They didn't need tons of integrations, tons of custom reporting. They also, most of them didn't have a contract. They were just at that point where they were looking for a solution to automate that process. And so when we launched that platform, we focused on that lower end of the market. It gave us a chance to actually get some customers on board. They didn't need all the complex functionality that the bigger Fortune 1000 brands did. And so it was a way for us to move really quickly with, what amounted to almost like an MVP version of our platform for the big Fortune 1000 companies. But it met the needs of those smaller companies. So that's where we launched. And then that gave us time for our sales team to build out their long-term sales plan. It gave us time for them to work through that 18-month sales cycle while we were generating some revenue from the smaller end of the market from people who needed a much simpler version of the product. And so, that was a, kind of B2B enterprise solution. But a lot of times that's true in other places. Is there a particular type of buyer that you can target who needs a simplified version of your solution, who doesn't need all the functionality that you're going to develop over time? Build your go-to-market strategy around that. Start with that segment so that you can quickly get people using that solution that you're building, that you can quickly have some success with that launch, and then over time, build out the additional functionality that you're thinking about doing.
Wonderful tips. They got their money's worth too. We're just giving away the tips today. And when you're giving away tips, time tends to fly so fast, Clark. We got a couple minutes left. You got time for one more?
I think so, yeah.
I'd like to toss in, we got a book recommendation opportunity here from Michael. Michael says, are there any famous case studies or reads that you know of that you can point me to that can help me learn more about customer pain points or issues that are pervasive and urgent? I'm interested in product management and have been looking for additional reads to get my feet wet. Book recommendation time.
So yeah, there's a couple that I recommend. They're not necessarily case studies, but they're really good tools for trying to understand how do I figure out what pain points are out there that are pervasive and urgent. The first one is a great book, and these are both short books. The first one is a book called The Mom Test, written by a guy named Rob Fitzpatrick. And his entire kind of idea behind the book is the fact that you never want to ask your mom if something you are thinking about doing is a good idea, because she's always going to tell you it is. And so he wrote the book to help people figure out, how do you get honest feedback from customers, from your users, about the things that you're thinking about doing. It's about 100 pages, not a really long read. The other book that I love is a book called Talking to Humans. It's written by a guy named Giff Constable. And I think his partner's name was Tom Fishburne. But again, it comes from more of a B2B kind of technology perspective, but it is also a book about, how do you figure out what your customers want? How do you ask good questions and get that helpful feedback? Those are the two books that I recommend for that. They're really more about how you can identify customer pain points and issues. And so I think those are probably going to be kind of really helpful books. I mean, there's tons of great biographies out there, of everybody from the Walter Isaacson biography of Steve Jobs. He also wrote a great book called The Innovators. So those are great books if you just want to go read a great story about how other people have done it. But I think Talking to Humans and The Mom Test are the books that I would recommend, because they're more about how can you go do it.
Man, look at the fantastically on the ball Callie posting the Amazon links.
Awesome.
in real time. This is service, folks. This is how you do it. Thank you, Callie. And Clark, this has been fantastic. How is this only your first time? How have we not gotten you on here before?
I don't know. I've
What
been
a
hiding.
fantastic resource.
Oh, thanks so
Hiding.
much.
Let me give a shout out to the next in our product chat series. That happens Thursday, January 28th at 1:30 Eastern Time. We will welcome Dave West. He's CEO and product owner of Scrum.org and is going to address what else? Agile product management, specifically how the product owner naturally fits into an agile product delivery organization. So don't miss that one. And of course, if you've got more questions, join us every Friday right here for the Ask Me Anything series with a Pragmatic Institute instructor, Fridays, 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And Clark, it's been fantastic. Thank you so much for doing it. Great job. Stay healthy, everyone. Stay